Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on my channel. It is Kevin or Kev here, and in this week's video I did not have a plan. In my last video I got that idea from my childhood, and the video before that was just a recreation of one of my older videos, and so I was kind of just trying to brainstorm something, and I was like, wouldn't this be funny? What if like there was just a fancy room and it had a Muppet in it? I don't know why, it just popped into my head. I also needed to try and make wainscoting. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say, because in my pop culture dollhouse I want to start eventually, it's going to have some in that, so I needed to learn how to make it, or at least attempt to make it, because a lot of my miniatures I try to learn techniques that will go into bigger projects in the future. Yeah, I needed to practice, and so I came up with this idea, and then I was like, okay, let's throw a Muppet in it. I don't know. So a lot of the techniques in this will go towards my future big dollhouse idea eventually, once I have time and space to do that. Let's go ahead and turn the camera around. Let's not make this intro long, because I know that you guys want to see what I'm making, and we're just gonna turn around and get started. We're starting off this video strong by taking out the shadow box and all of the popsicle sticks. Well, not all of the popsicle sticks I'll need, but some of them. I'm gonna give you a spoiler right off the bat and let you know that this doesn't go according to plan because of what I'm doing right here. And I won't explain further, but maybe you'll see my mistake when watching this. But let me just tell you, it's not gonna go all according to plan. Because I had never made wainscoting before, I wanted to just draw it out on this piece of paper, which, again, another spoiler, something that's going to mess up later. But I wanted to draw it on here so I got an idea of what I was building. I figured I could make it outside of the shadow box and then build it into the shadow box, or glue it in, which, again, many issues, many issues. And this is just two of many issues that will arise for this project. If you watched my last video, you may know I had some problems with my miter shear, so I went ahead and got out my miter box instead and cut these so that way they'd be straight and they wouldn't shatter or blow out, as somebody told me it was called. Once I had all my pieces cut out, I glued them down, used my 1, 2, 3 blocks. This was just a lot of tongue depressor, popsicle stick, coffee stir cutting and gluing down to make the wainscoting. Honestly, I'm not really sure how I can make that more exciting. It was exciting because I'd never done it before. It took a lot of measuring, a lot of cutting of sticks, a lot of gluing down and waiting, and then you get some wainscoting. If you're interested, try it out. It's pretty easy. Well, I thought it was. The nightmare has not begun yet. Okay, so now that I've gotten to this point, I really like how it's looking, but I don't like the little gaps, obviously, especially on the sides. Let's see if you can see that. See, you can kind of see it. I don't have any wood filler, but I do have this lightweight spackling from when I had to repair a hole in a ceiling. So I'm wondering if I could just try and fill in the holes with this. I don't know if it's gonna work. Is this no sanding required? Okay, I'm gonna try. We'll see how this works. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to try and put it on the bottom first, the bottom of the wainscoting. Where is the bottom? I'm gonna use this side as the bottom. I'm gonna try and put it here so that way if it looks bad, you won't be able to see anyway when it's actually in the shadow box, because this will be along the floor. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it on this side and just see how it looks. At first I couldn't find my palette knife, so I used this popsicle stick and I forgot to stir it, so it was a little difficult. It wasn't dried out, but it didn't spread very well until I mixed it once I found my palette knife. But it did work for the most part. I think I would use it again, but wood filler probably would have worked better. Now that this is dry, I'm gonna go ahead and try and paint it. I've never worked with this before. Supposedly you can paint it and it's gonna be fine. We will see. I mean, it's probably gonna be fine, but I just wanna check. Might as well do it on the bottom, right? Here I am testing painting the lightweight spackle. What I will say is it does work. It's not a completely smooth, seamless look that I think you would get with wood filler, but I do like how filled it was, and I do like that the paint went over it really well. What I will say is I think I should have used a primer on this, is my guess, because it took a lot of coats to go over all this wood. I don't know what I was thinking. Normally I think I probably would have used a primer, but I wasn't thinking, I guess. It was just one of many nightmares for this project, as you'll see, because I still haven't gotten to the nightmare parts. I filled the rest of the cracks with the lightweight spackling, and then the real nightmares began. I don't know what I was expecting, what I thought was going to happen here, because I know that paper warps, especially thin printer paper, which is what I used for this, when it gets wet, when you put paint on it, and it can do it very badly. I wasn't thinking, and I started to paint this. I panicked and I tried to start painting the other side to try and maybe even out the warp, but as you can see on screen, it did not work. I panicked and just thought, okay, we're just gonna wing it and see what happens. In my panic of watching this warp really badly, I thought, why not try and flatten it out? And I don't know why I thought that would work, but I grabbed my 1, 2, 3 block and I tried flattening out the warping. Didn't work. As you can see, this really disheartened me because I had spent so many hours on this. I know it may not look like it, but I spent so many hours on this and I felt like within seconds it had been ruined. However, I refused to let this stop me. I wasn't going to give up on this video. I wasn't going to give up on this shadow box. And I just ripped my way through the paper in the back. And it hurt. It hurt my soul quite a bit. But I did it. I ripped it and decided to start the back part of the wainscoting from scratch. I didn't want to make the same mistake twice, so I decided to go with mat board, which here I am measuring out the new piece for the back. Then I cut it out. Put lots and lots of glue on the back of the wooden part of the wainscoting, and then put a weight on it so it would dry, flat, and not warp. Moving on to the wallpaper, I chose this design, which is called Strawberry Thief by William Morris. I think this is the original colorway. It's the indigo one. I believe this is the original, and I just really like William Morris wallpaper. I'm not going to be selling this wallpaper or anything, so I felt okay taking it just to make my own shadow box, and this is what I chose. I really like the strawberries and the birds on it, and like I said, I just really like his designs. However, this is where Nightmare 2 comes into play. If you've ever bought these shadow boxes, you know that they have a little black frame on the inside that helps hold the glass where it is inside the frame. And I did not take that into account when making the wainscoting. I did the full 8 inches, which is what the back of the shadow box is supposed to be. It's the technical dimensions of this all. But as you can see, it doesn't actually fit inside the frame. I wasn't willing to cut the wainscoting. I had spent too much time on this. I had already redone the back of it, and I just honestly was not willing to trim it. I wanted to keep it intact. The only thing I could think of doing instead was to take apart the black frame. Some people may say, why not just completely take it out? But the issue with these shadow boxes is you actually need that frame to hold the glass, otherwise it will rattle inside the frame. It's the only thing that keeps it from rattling around, which would break eventually. So instead, I took apart the black frame on the inside of the shadow box and decided that I would only use the top and the bottom parts to hold the glass in place, and there'd be no side parts to the black frame, so that way the wainscoting can go to each side of the inside of the shadow box. After taking it apart, I had to take out the nails from these, which are very sharp, so be very careful if you ever take these apart. I was shocked by how sharp they were. I wanted to make sure that the wainscoting would actually fit still, and it is a little bit bigger than the black piece that goes on the bottom, but I am going to cover it up with floorboards anyway, so I wasn't too worried about it. Now that the paper had been replaced with matte board and I knew it wouldn't warp, I got back to painting the color I wanted. Again, I should have primed this all, even though, you know, it's not like difficult things to cover. Priming would have just made it a lot quicker of a job. There were also some portions that I think maybe I'd gotten glue or something down because no matter how many times I painted over it, it just would not stick. So like I said, just priming it was a good idea. Well, would have been a good idea because this paint did not want to stick to the glue and it was a little opaque. Now it's time for the star attraction of this entire shadow box. When I make these, I really like to have one main focal point. And in this one, obviously, it's the Muppet. And I saw online that you could make a faux oil painting by putting down Mod Podge on top of a picture. So what I did is I found these two handsome pictures of Kermit. I ran them through a filter that made it look like it was painted with oil paint rather than just like a photograph of a Muppet. And then I started going to town with the Mod Podge. Apparently you just kind of like clunk it on. It can be really thick. I did a thin layer first and let that dry so that way I wouldn't ruin the picture by putting way too much Mod Podge on. Mod Podge. And then they say to just kind of treat it as if you're painting the oil strokes yourself, but with the Mod Podge. So that's what I did. This ended up being a really simple thing to do, but I ended up really loving how it looks in the end, and I do like the texture that it added. I don't know how well you can see it behind the glass of the shadow box, but I do really like how it turned out. If you've seen me make a shadow box before, you've seen me put a floor on a million times, so that's what I'm doing here. I just glued down some coffee stir sticks and stained them with my stain pen. Then I got popsicle sticks and coffee stir sticks out because I was going to lay them up to make a nice looking frame for Kermit, and I stained these the same color as the floor to kind of tie it all together. Because I had removed the inner black frame that holds the glass in for the shadow box, you were going to be able to see the sides of the actual inside of the shadow box. So what I did is I just printed out a little bit more of the Strawberry Thief wallpaper and I put that in the inside. So it is going to be a little inset inside the shadow box, but if somebody were to look to the side and try and look into it, they wouldn't see a bare shadow box, they will see more of the wallpaper. Once the side wallpapers were in, I put a lot of glue on this, which is the floor, and I just shoved it into place. This was also a mistake that will come to haunt me later. I then put some glue down on the top piece of the black frame and put it at the top. Again, this was probably fine. This was not going to haunt me, but the bottom part really going to haunt me. This is where the next nightmare begins. I'm just living my life, excited for everything that's coming, for the shadow box that's almost done. Putting glue down with not a care in the world, and Nightmare fuel. So, something I didn't realize or think about, because everything that can go wrong will go wrong, is I needed to leave a gap for this. So, had to rip this off, and that's where we're at now. I think I can fix this, but it does feel like anything that could go wrong with this project is going wrong with this project. So, let's get this figured out. I measured out the thickness of the floor, and then I measured out on the back page where the wainscoting needed to be glued to leave the right gap, and then I just glued it back on. And, you know, it sounds easy, but it took me a lot more time than I'd like to admit, because I was really struggling at this point. I, you know, was kind of over the shadow box. I wish I could say that was my last problem with the shadow box, but it absolutely was not. I don't know if the floor was warped. It had to have been the floor, because I know the wainscoting couldn't have been because it was popsicle sticks. But when I put the wainscoting on and then I put it up against the floor, there was a gap underneath it, and you could very clearly see the white ripped up wallpaper underneath it. So I had to take the stain, which I know you're not supposed to use for this, but I colored this in hopes that it would cover up any damage. And as you can see here, you can't really see on camera, but believe me, in person, it was incredibly noticeable. Once I was sure that you weren't going to see that anymore, I put lots of glue on the back, and then I glued it back on for the second time. What would this video be without me messing up again and having another nightmare? When I was making the picture frame for Kermit, I accidentally used 2 different angles on the miter box. So when I tried putting the frame together, it did not work. And I really thought at this point I was going to lose my mind, okay? But you know what? I wanted to get it done. I still liked the idea of it. And sometimes in art, you just got to push through and keep going. And that's what I did, because I didn't lose my mind. I'm still here. But man, was this shadow box testing me. Here's the base layer of the frame. Then I just needed to add the second layer with the coffee stir sticks, and then I stained it to match, again, the floor so that we would tie it all together. I did overstain this, but I had a paper towel on the ready this time to wipe off the excess, so that way it would look nice and not be sticky, because I learned that if you use too much stain and you don't wipe it off, it gets sticky and it gets all over your hands. And I will say, wear protective gear. I'm 99% sure I was supposed to be wearing gloves while doing this, but my hands haven't fallen off yet. But wear gloves, wear protective gear. Don't take me as an example. After it was completely dry, I went ahead and put Kermit in his correct place, which is in the fancy frame. Is it super fancy? No. Does he look great in it? Yes. And that is what matters. I used my 1, 2, 3 blocks to help position him to make sure he was straight, but then I realized that the wainscoting is not completely straight, so I did have to adjust it slightly to look straight with the wainscoting. Again, just nightmare after nightmare. But in the end, he looks good. He looks centered, and it scratched that itch in my brain to make this. That's it for this video. You know, this was probably one of the most frustrating miniatures I've ever made. I feel like anything that could go wrong did go wrong. It was a lot of issues in this one, but you know, in the end, I'm glad it's done. Ignore the ring light. It's, you know, it's really hard to record things with glass, but you know, I'm glad. I like how it turned out in the end. It had a lot of issues. I messed up quite a bit, but you know what? There were probably all me issues that I probably should have seen coming. You live and you learn, so hopefully when I make wainscoting and these faux oil paintings in the future, I will have a better idea of what I'm doing. Right? That's what miniatures is about. Learning, growing, your art changes, and yada yada. Hopefully I'm better in the future. So that's it for this video. If you like the Muppet, let me know. Who's your favorite Muppet? Kermit's not my favorite Muppet. I'd probably say, I don't know who's my favorite Muppet is. Cookie Monster's technically a Muppet, right? Because Sesame Street, they're Muppets. So I would say Cookie Monster, but out of the original, probably Rizzo the Rat. He ice skates with butter on a frying pan. Let me know what's your favorite Muppet, because is it Kermit? He's a classic, you know, that's why I had to go with Kermit. For a second, I looked at that, I was like, is the wallpaper upside down? So I obviously need to stop looking at this project for now. Thank you all for watching. If you like me or you like miniatures, make sure you hit that subscribe button below, and I'll see you in my next video. Goodbye!